Well, hello.
Hello, Jonathan. How are you on this beautiful, beautiful, not so sunny day?
Okay, it's weird because if I cross the entrance door, I'm really cold. If I step inside, I'm really warm. So I'm in between. And how are you, Nadine?
I'm pretty good, and I was fine this morning, but now when I'm looking outside, I don't want to go out there because it doesn't look too pleasant.
Well, welcome everyone to another Askable Adult Live, the show where we talk all about sex ed community and our health. Today we have a very special guest,
We
but
do.
before going right into that conversation, as usual, we want to give our usual acknowledgments and recognitions, and that is that Black Lives Matter today and always.
Yes. Yes, yes. And who
Um,
are you, Jonathan?
Hi everyone. My name is Jonathan Rodriguez. I use he, him, and el pronouns, and I'm the Youth and Health Resource Center coordinator for Berks Teens Matters. And who is with me?
My name is Nadine, and I use they and their pronouns, and I am the community liaison for Berks Teens Matter.
And I think you know more about our guest, but what I've heard is that this amazing person has been a supporter of BTM from a time before BTM even had a name.
He even
First,
had a name. That's correct.
first appearing in our Start the Conversation podcast to talk about what else, Nadine? To talk about what?
About starting the
The
conversations, starting
conversation.
the conversations about sexual health with age appropriate conversations early in life and keeping them going through the years. And so we want to welcome who is now the Director of Pediatric Services for Berks Community Health Center, Dr. Karen Wang.
Hi,
Yes,
Dr.
yes, yes,
Wong.
yes,
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. It is rainy out, but not too cold. I got a quick walk in before this, so yeah, it's not bad.
Good to know it's not too cold. We were out a little earlier and it was kind of windy and
Yes.
felt cold.
I think that
Not
died
now?
down a little bit, so it's a little better.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
You can
Time to go
leave the
home.
office, Nadine.
Okay. I appreciate that. I was beginning to think I might have to spend the night.
Yeah.
Dr. Wong, and that's how I pronounce. That's
Yes.
how we're supposed to pronounce your last name, right? Wong.
That is correct.
Perfect. So, Dr. Wong, we know that you have a very demanding schedule at Berks Community Health Center, and knowing that multiplies our appreciation for your willingness to set aside a little bit of time to be here with us today. But before we dive into today's topic about starting the conversations, we have a couple of questions about your background and your work.
Sure.
So I don't know if this has been asked before, but what inspired you to enter the healthcare profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that one. I grew up in York County, so I'm a Central Pennsylvania girl by birth, and I had asthma as a kid, and so I was hospitalized a couple times with my asthma, and then my mom always worked in medical offices, so I think, and I was good in school, and so I think I was a bright kind of bookish kid who stayed in from recess because of my asthma, and so I read a lot. And so between that and then exposure to medicine through my own childhood asthma, I got interested in being a pediatrician myself. So I'm kind of an anomaly in that I kind of in high school started saying that I wanted to have the kind of job that's exactly like the job I have now. So I was very focused and took a couple small detours, but I'm not very good at helping people figure out what they want to do because I didn't really go through like one of those. I kind of just knew. So.
Wow. What a gift that is to just be able to know and then to follow that.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
And since high school.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah.
No. And since high school, a lot of teams are, what exactly do I really want to be? Is it required for me to know since this age? And you had it figured out and you went for it and you got it. That's awesome.
And I had great teachers and family members who were super supportive to get me where I am today. So
nice. And it's always good to remember that when we follow our path like that there needs to be a lot of people along the way who are helping us out and supporting us in that. Yeah. That's a great reminder. So I thought, now I'm not so sure if I'm right about this or not, but I thought that I remembered from way back when, before Berks Teens Matter was Berks Teens Matter, that prior to working at the place that you worked before the Community Health Center, that somebody told me you had come to Berks County from Massachusetts.
That is true. So I already gave up that I'm from York County originally. So coming to Berks was kind of a circling back to central Pennsylvania. But I am a first generation college student. So I went to Penn State and I met my husband there. And he wanted to get a PhD and I wanted to go to med school. And we got married frightfully young. Now that I have teenagers, now I find that frightfully young. And then, but we were very lucky to continue to grow up together. So we went to Boston after Penn State, and we both did all our graduate studies there. So I went to med school there and did what's called residency, which is the training in pediatrics after med school in Boston, and then worked at a qualified health center like the one I work at now in Boston for a couple of years. And then after having my son, who's going to be 20 before you know it, after having him, we decided we needed to move back to Pennsylvania and be closer to family. To raise our own family. So then we made our way to the Philly suburbs and then to Berks County about 15 years ago.
Okay.
Wow.
What a nice journey.
Yes. So it was definitely a circle.
Yeah. And of course, recollecting experiences and knowledge along the way. So
yes. All kinds of, Boston's a fantastic city. If you have a chance to live there, I highly recommend it. But
a lot goes on there.
Yeah.
So, Nadine, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna ask a question, but you can go ahead.
Well, I can say.
We do this back and forth a little bit. Well, actually, I think we were both kind of wondering. There are some people in the community who are not familiar with Berks Community Health Center. So before we get into things about being a pediatrician and the connection to Berks Teens Matter, could you just tell us a little bit about the Community Health Center model and the services that are available there?
Yeah, absolutely. Berks Community Health Center is, first of all, it's a great place and they do amazing work. So I was really excited to join their team about 2.5 years ago now. And we have 4 locations all around the city. I'm at the location at 11th and Rockland, right by Albright College. And there's a location at 838 Penn Street. That's where we have our COVID testing site. And that's the original location for the health center. So a lot of people are familiar with that one. There's a small location right near Opportunity House on 2nd Street. And then we have a location in the Oak Brook neighborhood as well. So we have those 4 locations all around the city. And we have comprehensive health services of all sorts for people, regardless of their ability to pay. So if you don't have insurance, if you can't get insurance, can't afford insurance, aren't sure how you'd look for insurance, you can come to us, and people can connect you to find out if you are eligible for something you might not know about. And we have what's called a sliding fee. So it might be, say, $20 to see a doctor or nurse practitioner there, as opposed to what it might cost out of pocket other places. So we have dental services. We have new addition up at Rockland is OBGYN services. So we have prenatal care there, as well as full gynecology care for teens and adults. We have optometrists, chiropractors. We have primary care for grownups, and then my team for primary care for kids. And we have lots of family doctors and nurse practitioners who see people of all ages, from tiny babies up until 90-year-olds. So, and we've been doing a lot of vaccine and testing through the pandemic. So that's how a lot of people have heard about us for the first time. But we've been here, and and we have a little bit of everything. So we also have a medication assisted treatment for people with addiction issues, and trying to think, I'm sure I forgot at least one service, but yeah, we have a little bit of everything. So definitely check out the website, and and call us and come in.
Sounds like a good community resource, especially in these times when healthcare can be so difficult for a lot of people to access because of financial constraints and insurance issues and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah,
it's really
certainly
good.
Makes us realize how everybody's health is connected. So extra important to connect people to healthcare.
Exactly.
One question, Dr. Wang. If a person goes to to your clinic at Rockland, can they also go to the one on Penn Street, and can they have access? It's kind of like in the same system.
Yeah, like the electronic record that we use, you can open at any of the sites. So if one of the patients who's normally seen at 2nd Street can only get an appointment with me at Rockland one day, I can see all their history and everything I need to know about the patient, and then I can return them back to their primary care doctor over at 2nd Street for their next checkup. So, we work together all as one big team, and many people have a preferred location because that's where their regular provider is. But sometimes we don't have all those services at all the locations every day. So you might, to see the chiropractor, you might have to go to a certain location, something like that.
In the one up in, I'm sorry, Nadine, the one in Brooklyn offers, that's the one that has the OBGYN, right?
Yes, that's where our OBGYN is at Rockland.
Yes. And that's how I learned. I remember when I moved to Berks County, I remember that I learned about the one in Penn Street, and that's the one that I kind of went. And then I don't know who it was who told me, oh, maybe those services are in the Rockland. And I'm like, first of all, what is Rockland? And second, where is that? And I end up finding out that, oh, there's another one, and then I learned about another one.
I know it's only like a 10-minute drive, but it feels like it's like a world away from Penn Street or 2nd Street. Yeah.
But it's to me, it's really surprising that many people in the community don't know, because I'm like, that's just like there, it's just there.
Yeah. And Rockland is only 3 years old, that location. So it's kind of the baby of the offices, even though it's the largest site and has the most single site services. But so a lot of people haven't learned, or they don't know what it is. They think it's an urgent care, or they just haven't really wandered in. So yeah, I'm happy to spread the word and get people to come through the doors and find out what we've got.
So Nadine, I think you were gonna say something.
I was, and now I'm getting all kinds of things are going through my head about the community health center. But there's something particular that we want to get to too. So I'm going to kind of shift. because all that stuff about the community health center is important, and maybe sometime we'll do a show just about that. However, one of the ways that I got connected with you early on, as I remember, is that somebody, I believe it was Colleen, who told me that this Dr. Wang, she's really great and she really has a passion for sexual health and teens, and it's really important to her. And so it's important that we connect with her and all those things. And so, we know that for a lot of people, as soon as we say the word sexual health, people hear the sex part and their brain just goes blank. And they sort of lock in on what are like sexual behaviors, and they think that that's all there is to sexual health. So we were just wondering, if you were to define for somebody what sexual health is, provide a definition, or maybe you have a favorite definition that you've got from someplace else. Would you be willing to share that as the foundation for the rest of our conversation today?
Sure. I don't have like a formal, dictionary type definition of sexual health for you, but I think what's important for me is trying to make sure people understand that sexual health is part of their whole health. And that's true for kids as well as teenagers. I still see a lot of parents who say, well, I've had the talk with them, or I didn't think I needed to have the talk with them yet. And I just try to, as we talked about years ago, make sure people understand it's not a conversation you have once in your life with your kids about sex and about their own health. So, and we'll talk more about that. But so I think sexual health is just, either related to the parts of the body that, are related to reproduction. And then also about, how that impacts us psychologically and physically. So it's really just integrated into your whole health, I think. And more so at certain times of life than others. We don't, sort of kids are, different phases, it's a bigger issue than others. How's that? But it's always part of our whole health.
And I do appreciate that you said, it's part of our whole health, because, children have a sexuality, but it's not the same, maybe our own understanding of what sexuality is, or an adult perspective. Sometimes children will touch their bodies. They are experimenting. What is this? What does this do? But that is not in the same context that we adults will see it. If an adult is touching themselves, it's like, what are you doing? You already know what's up, but but a child is learning about their bodies, and I think it's very important for adults not to shame them. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
No. And I think, we bring our own. So if we're parents or we're caregivers or close to children, we bring our own baggage about sexuality, about experiences, I work with a number of parents who, were touched inappropriately as children themselves, or sort of survivors of, various levels of sexual abuse. And so you bring that to your own parenting and things like that. So some people are very uncomfortable if a child is, touching their own private parts, because it brings up for them some recollection or some fears about inappropriate touching. And so making sure parents understand that just because, say, a preschooler or a toddler has figured out that touching certain parts of their body feels good, doesn't mean that someone has done something inappropriate. Now a child who repeatedly, masturbates or touches themselves or behaves in a way that doesn't seem appropriate, on recurrent occasions, that might be a red flag that they've either had that someone has touched them inappropriately, or they've been exposed to things. We see kids who've just, say, not been sheltered appropriately from adults who might be watching pornography or something like that. And so they may, have absorbed that and be acting up. Doesn't mean, not that kids should be watching pornography, but that it doesn't mean that somebody did something to them other than not supervise them well while the TV was on, in another room. So, or the computer, was. So I think that we bring our own baggage to these discussions with kids. And so we have to kind of remember that. And so I talk to parents about that kind of all the time. It is really normal for little kids to figure out that touching certain parts of their body feel good. And that's completely normal. And as long as it's not something they do, for large chunks of a day, then it doesn't get us too worried,
In what you mentioned, about the pornography aspect, is, pornography, we may have an understanding again of what it could be, but it doesn't have to be as explicit. It could be, a video that they found on YouTube. It can be a movie that they were watching, that is showcasing certain behaviors, certain adult behaviors, that kids might just don't know, but they are being exposed. And especially in today's age where everyone has a phone, everyone has access to the internet pretty much, even the most alert, let's say, parents may sometimes it slips. So the important thing is that we have conversations where, for example, did you feel that you saw something inappropriate? You can bring it to me and I'm not gonna get mad, because maybe it wasn't your fault. Maybe you just clicked on something and it was an ad, because that has happened on YouTube. So or
yeah,
Netflix,
definitely. I mean, I think that certainly with the internet and everybody having a smartphone, makes a lot of things accessible, and it's impossible to filter everything, like you said. And so I think, and people hand over their phones to their kids without thinking a lot. And so even if it, and just like you said, you're just a click away from something, you might, and so that can easily expose someone to something. Kids mimic what they see and what they hear. Almost everyone has had the experience of using a word they wouldn't necessarily find appropriate for children, and then hearing a child they've been around repeat that word, even though they thought they were generally filtering themselves and using a curse word or something like that, or some phrasing. And so it's really the same thing. So reminding parents that, that may have been, what happened. And I see kids all the time, especially around, custody issues. And then I take care of a lot of kids who are in foster care, and people are always appropriately paranoid, trying to wonder what a child has been through, and think sexual acting out behaviors definitely mean that a child was a victim of sexual abuse. And while that's a complicated thing to sort out, that we need to do and is crucial to do, but you can't assume that every sexual behavior that a child has means that, and like I said, how we interpret it is important. So without getting too stuck on that one point, but I think that's important to remember. And then that, you have to filter and pay attention to what your kids are watching,
And keep those conversations going.
Yep, and keep talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you make time in the time that you are seeing patients and seeing parents? How do you fit all this in? Because I imagine that, and I think that there's also physicians who happen to be human beings also, who may have their own relative levels of comfort with some of these conversations. And so then you have that, and then you have the time constraints and all the other demands. How do you help parents with this kind of conversations, and how do you support them? How do you find time for it? All that good stuff.
Yeah. And I think it definitely takes work to put it on the priority list. I think they said for like a pediatrician visit, if you covered all the things that our national guidelines recommend you covered at every visit, it would take an hour and a half to cover everything, and nobody could possibly spend that much time in any one visit. I mean, I think the good thing is that in general pediatrics, you have a relationship with a family over time. And so I don't have to fit everything into the first visit. I can take care of that kid. And I have had the great fortune of taking care of many kids for many, many years. Now I have some families that I've known for the whole 15 years I've been here in Berks County. And so that's really fun. I've taken care of their children as a newborn, and those kids entered high school this year. So that was pretty wild. It was a nice landmark. And so I don't try to do everything in one visit, because I couldn't, because I am human, and all the other doctors in the county are human too. And, and then I think it just depends at each visit, what you're covering might be depending on the age and the developmental stage of the child, or the issues a family might be facing and things like that. So I find it really important so sometimes kids come in with a concern about a behavior, and then we just talk about it a little bit more. At every visit, even with little kids, pretty much everybody preschool age and up, as I'm doing an examination of their body, when I look at parts that we consider private parts, I'll say, okay, I'm going to check your private parts now. That's okay, because we're here at a doctor's visit and your dad is right here. And so that's why it's okay. It's important to say it's not okay because I'm a doctor, because people have taken advantage of that, unfortunately, and not to feel like I'm overly focused on child sexual abuse. But I think that way we can start a discussion, and then I see if they seem to understand what private parts are when I just kind of bring it up. And I just do that while I'm talking and I'm examining the kid. So I'm kind of just working that into the visit. And then then I can turn to the parents and say, do you guys talk about private parts and, and good touch and bad touch? And so that's sort of baseline for preschoolers, early elementary school kids. And I reiterate that at every visit. As kids get older, they get more private about their body. So we talk about it again. And then we prepare kids by middle school, where either some kids are real nervous and still want their parents there all the time, or maybe it's the first time I'm meeting a family, and I don't generally kick parents out of the room for part of a visit the first time I'm meeting them, unless it's an older teen. But for kids in middle school age, I'll say, okay, well, next year, I'm probably going to kick you out for part of the visit. So we try to prepare them for that. And say to let them know that the kids will have private time the next visit. Naturally, that often works when I'm examining them. I'll say, oh, they're going to get changed into a gown. Most kids want a little privacy now. And many parents I see are relieved, because they're happy to know that I'm going to talk to them about some stuff. I think they hope I'm going to cover everything about sex, drugs, and, everything bad they might be exposed to in those 5 minutes when I have the kid alone. They're just like, oh, thank God she's going to cover all that stuff. So good. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So, and then we do have some parents, if the kid seems very nervous or prefers to not do that, I'll talk about that with them. I don't force anyone out of a room. If a kid seems comfortable, or if a parent seems really nervous, I have some parents who are like, oh, they tell me everything. And I'm like, that's fine. I mean, most kids just want a little privacy, and we're training them to handle a doctor's visit on their own. They're going to need to handle this in a couple of years, just like you teach them to drive and you teach them to, use an ATM or get some groceries, cook a meal. We're teaching them to handle a doctor's visit on their own. So I usually start and end with the parents in the room. And then the older the kid gets, sometimes I'll have kids who just come in on their own, later. And so that kids who might be watching know you can, if your doctor's office doesn't routinely do this, you can ask to have some privacy at a visit. and you can make your own appointment for certain kinds of issues. And every office handles this a little bit differently. But if you have an issue with your mental health, with drug or alcohol concerns, or with sexual health issues, you can go to the doctors on your own. You don't have to be 18. Between 14 and 18, you can get care on your own for that. It can be, I'm not saying it's perfect, because it can be complicated. Sometimes your insurance might send a bill that your parents see, unfortunately. So it can be, but there are ways to get care on your own. If you need more information about that, you can talk. Somebody at Berks Teens Matter might be able to help you with that. But I think that Jonathan can help you with that. Go see him at Reading High. And so, but kids should know that they can get care for some things on their own. And it might seem weird that you can go in and get birth control on your own, but then when you're coming for a cold, your mom has to be there. But that's just how the rules are. So I don't understand that either. But and different places are more rigid about this than others. If it's so I'll just say that while not breaking any rules about it. So different places are more rigid about that than others. So, but I think many doctors do have time alone with teenagers, especially. I encourage my colleagues to do that. And I think it's an important part of every visit that I do with kids, middle school and up. And if I actually get a little concerned if a parent of a teenager won't let me see them alone for a few minutes. I think sometimes parents of teenagers are too interested in being their best friend and not in having an appropriate separation. So, but I try to use that line about preparing them for a doctor's visit alone.
I think that's a wonderful, there's so many things that you said that I really, really like. But one of the things that was in my mind as I was listening to you, when you talked about having these conversations, not just like one conversation with the child when you're seeing them, but that you have lots of little pieces that you do at every visit over the lifespan, that you do them age and developmentally appropriate and depending on what issues they might bring. Because to me, that's like the exact same model that we try to say to parents about having conversations about sexual health. So you're modeling that for them, and the issues that come up provide natural opportunities to have conversations that relate to sexual health often. But I also really love, because I think that's so important, that we're preparing our young people just like we're preparing them to be responsible adults by having conversations about sexual health and other things in life. We're preparing them to be their own advocate in the healthcare system and to know how to handle those kinds of things. It's all preparation for being a healthy adult in the community.
Yeah.
I love that.
And some parents have more trouble than others imagining their kids as independent adults, right? So, and especially with teenagers, because you can want them to be independent and then, want them to be 5 again, all at the same time. And so it is hard to, and I think definitely this is something that's been important to me since I was a very young doctor and was closer in age to the teenagers than to their parents. And now that I'm a parent of teenagers, it certainly changes how I understand the complexity of the job of parenting teenagers, having now been in the middle of it myself. But I think it's still been important to me to figure out how to talk to kids about it at visits. So, yeah.
You already answered a question that I had, but I've had several young people coming to the HRC with that specific concern. I want to talk to my doctor, but my parents will not leave the room, or the doctor will not provide that space for me. Sometimes it's it's about either their health, their sexual health, their mental health. Sometimes they actually want to get into treatment, or they want to talk to a therapist, but then they don't know how to express it to the doctor because their parents or family members are there. And something that I mentioned to a few people, either call in advance and request the doctor to at some point to allow you some private space with them, so you can talk about whatever you want to talk. Or just prepare your parents. I'm gonna ask stuff and you may not want to hear it. It's on you. But I need to ask, I need to talk to my doctor. And because I think sometimes can be very intimidating going to the doctor alone. And especially 14, 15-year-old is like, why will I go alone to a doctor? Like, my parents should be there, but being there doesn't mean being always there, like inside with me. So I try to, the reality is that if you want this, you will have to pursue it yourself, because again, I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to your parents. But one thing that you can do is call in advance, being very direct. If you didn't call, maybe you can just stand up, go to the reception and request it, just like, hey, at some point I want to talk to my doctor alone, can you relay that message?
And even if sometimes if they're at a visit and they want to talk about something alone, like, and their parent is there in the room, I mean, they could, if one of the staff takes them to, say, go get their height and weight and blood pressure and has the parent in a separate space, they could quietly say to the staff member, I was hoping to talk to my doctor alone for a few minutes today, and that person could alert the doctor. Or they could even excuse themselves to go to the bathroom from the examination room, and then grab a staff member and say, hey, I was hoping to let the doctor know I wanted them to kick my mom out for a few minutes. And so they could try that. That does feel like a lot on the kid. That's why I make it a routine but for offices where that's not the routine, where they're not having, for multiple reasons, like Nadine pointed out, because there's many things doctors are trying to cover. I think some doctors worry that they would make the parents uncomfortable by having the kid alone. And then it does just take more time. It definitely takes more time to start with a teenager and their parent in a room alone, escort the parent to a little waiting room, go back and talk to the kid alone, bring the parent back at the end. That definitely takes more time. And so I'm committed to doing that for the vast majority of my visits with teenagers. But right now, one thing that has been nice for a lot of my colleagues and I during the pandemic, a lot of doctors have been able to do what we call telemedicine visits, right? Like video visits with a doctor. And many pediatricians are finding that a really nice way to get to meet with teenagers alone. Because, and I think a lot of teenagers are able to access mental health care through a therapist without needing a ride to get to appointments. If you can see a therapist from your bedroom at home after school, when your mom would have been at work until 7 p.m. and no way she could have driven you to the therapist's office for a 3 o'clock appointment, I think that's a huge advantage for adolescents to get health care of all kinds in the pandemic. And many places are still making that available. So I would also say that a teenager could ask to have a telemedicine visit, and they might be able to have, it might be easier to get alone with their provider during that than, when their parents have to bring them. A 14-year-old might not be able to get to the doctors alone,
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that.
I love telemedicine.
I think it's been terrific, especially with teenagers. I hope that insurance companies hadn't been super willing to pay for it at great lengths before the pandemic, but I really, really hope that they continue to let us use it however we see fit. I see a lot of sick kids now by telemedicine where the parents don't need to leave the home with their kid with a fever. I can kind of check them from the office and bring them in when it's appropriate. And then I've been following up a lot of depressed and anxious teenagers with telemedicine on a regular basis. So yeah, I think it's been fantastic, and I love it as an overall addition to my care. So I think that's another way that they might be able to sneak in a visit alone. So
really good point. And anything that makes healthcare more accessible to people has to be a good thing.
Yeah. But I love the accessibility of a therapist. So
absolutely. I think that's one of the positive things that we can highlight from the pandemic. A lot of people still prefer, being in person with
absolutely.
with a doctor. But depending on the lifestyle of a person, depending on their schedule, especially for mental health, it can work out if they have the ability to be in a private space, a bedroom, a park that is not too crowded. They can choose where they are for their meetings.
I even know a kid who's like slipped out of the school day to have a therapy appointment, maybe sit in their own car. And they don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to take all that time. Or there might be a private space they can take a therapy appointment at their school if they work with their school counselor, and just makes visits much more accessible for a lot of teens, especially.
So, Dr. Wang, we've been here for a little bit, and I think we will enjoy staying here for more. But getting into the ending of our show, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is very important for parents to hear regarding youth, their sexual health, and maybe the world that we live in before we head out?
Not to keep the questions too big or anything.
I can't. I like to talk.
I have some suggestions on all the world's problems. So just make them now on Facebook Live so that they're just out there, right? So no, I mean, I think that if I could say that the one line to parents is, definitely don't think that you should, or that it's one talk with your kids about their sexual health. So, I mean, Berks Teens Matters resources, their website is great with all kinds of things about that. So check it out. And it is, I know with my now almost 20-year-old, one of those car conversations I was having with him about sex. So if parents who don't know this, if you can get your kid alone in a car where they're trapped, and is a great time to talk about sex with them because you're all trapped together in the car. And my own kid said to me at one point, "This is awkward." And I said, "Yes, it is. It is awkward. It's awkward for me too." And I think thinking that it's not supposed to be awkward if you're a good parent, I think it is going to be awkward, but just talk about it anyway. And keep trying to figure out ways to talk about it, and ask your doctor if you're not sure how to talk about it with your kids. And I think kind of what we covered a little bit earlier, but the internet is like awash in information. Make sure that you are controlling how your kids access information about sexual health on the internet. It's normal to be curious. And, most of us, when we were growing up and were curious about sexuality, didn't have like an internet of porn, like available to us, like right in front of us, and so, that is an issue that you need to be honest with your teens about, and you need to talk about, because, most of us like had, like a Judy Blume novel, or like somebody's dad's Playboys or something like that was like as close as we could get to, finding out more about sexual health. And so that is a world different about what they can find on their smartphone. And, you know, you're not going to be able to filter everything because there's no way you're going to be able to stay one step ahead of your teenagers with regard to technology. So be talking about it, because that is probably the biggest place kids are finding things out these days. And so you need to understand that and know that you're not going to completely prevent it. And then it's normal for them to be curious, but you want to like just be aware of what is out there so that, you know, you can have a conversation.
Yeah, I think those conversations are so important. There's a lot of good information out there too.
Absolutely. And people can find things in communities that they wouldn't have been able to access for so many kids. It's a great thing. But also there's some downsides to, you know, to being able to find so much information that's not, you know, guided by anyone, you know.
And that's where the conversations come in, I think. It's that kind of guidance and processing it out loud and that kind of thing was so important.
Yeah. So, you know, watch every time you see something. If you're watching something together, still try to do that sometimes. Watch a movie with your kids, check out something on YouTube, watch those TikTok videos or whatever with them, and talk about what you see. Like, what do you think about how that person's behaving? Or what do you think about those lyrics? You know, so that you can have a conversation, you know.
There's an opportunity for a conversation in our daily lives. It's just a matter of using it, you know, catch it, use it, don't. And if you were busy, if your mindset was not there, you can always come back and have a, you know, the conversation.
Yeah, you can always say, oh, hey, you know that thing we watched the other night? I was thinking about it since then, and I wasn't sure. What did you think about how he was treating her? You know?
Yeah.
What did you know, you can go back. What do you think about? And then, you know, so you can try. Sometimes teenagers will want to talk to you and sometimes they won't, but you can always try.
Yeah. You can always try. Love it.
Always try.
Well, Dr. Wang, it's been a pleasure. And of course, there was a ton of stuff that we could always talk more. So maybe if you come back at some point.
At some point. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Maybe if this pandemic calms down, I'll come back sometime.
Okay. That sounds like a deal.
And of course, be sure everyone to check Berks Community Health Center either at the website or just go to the locations and get their get information over there, get their amazing there you go. You're awesome, Dr. Wang. And we agree. So please check out their services, their everything that they have to offer. And check in with us next week on our Askable Adults Live.
Yes.
All right.
There we go.
Everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to see you guys.
Same
here.